Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another inks comparison video, and this is Scribo inks comparison number 2. So I think with that, let's swap up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the descriptions, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me when I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over. I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink I have here, and yes, these are going to be all samples, is Scribo Verde Prato. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And I have to say this is a very nice, bright, almost electric green going on there. Now we'll do a second pass over the top half, and this will show the difference between a wet or a broad writing nib and a dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Scribo, and it is Verde, and it is Prato. Now I do actually have the Scribo feel in the Verde Prato, and I have to say that that is a colour that I like, and I think that actually that probably matches the pen quite nicely. The next ink here is Scribo, and this is Verde Bosco. So we'll do another ink swatch here, and this is quite a dark green. I want to say it's a bluish green, almost perhaps even to a teal colour. We'll do a second pass over the top half, and this will just show the difference between a wet or a broad writing nib and a dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Scribo, and it is Verde Bosco. Now I also do have the Scribo feel in the Verde Bosco as well, and I would have to say that this is probably a slightly different green than I was expecting to try and match up with the the green of the Scribo fill. The next ink I have here is Scribo, and this is Blu Capri. And we'll do another ink swatch here. And I have to say, I'm already liking this blue colour. I am on a bit of a turquoisey coloured kick at the moment, and I have to say that that is quite nice. We'll do a second pass over the top half, and that will show the difference between a wet and a broad writing nib, or a dry and a narrow writing nib. So this is Scribo, and it is Blu Capri, which for me is a very nice turquoisey cerulean blue coloured ink. And I have to say, I think I might need to actually buy a bottle of that. And then the last ink here is Scribo Grigio Scribo. So we'll do another ink swatch. And I'd have to say this is a little bit more of a, I want to say somewhere between a grey and a blue black. So we'll do a second pass there that shows the difference between a wet and a broad writing nib, or a dry and a narrow writing nib. So this is Scribo, and it is Grigio, and it's Scribo. But I also want to say it's got some green in that as well. It's an interesting colour ink, and I'm not so sure that I actually have an ink in my collection of over 400 bottles that typically has that kind of shade going on. So I think let's now take a look at these inks now they have dried. So the first ink we have here is Scribo Verde Prato, and I do have the Scribo fill in the Verde Prato. I have to say, I always like inking it up with an ink very similar to this. And I typically will go for a number of different inks. I will go for a diamine ink, or I will go for an Ackerman ink. But this ink, I would definitely say, is an ink that I would like to ink up. This reminds me a little bit of Diamine Meadow, maybe more towards Diamine Apple Glory. So it's quite a nice colour ink, quite an electric green. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad, or a dry or narrow writing nib? Yes, you can. There's a huge difference there in that ink. Can you see shading going on? Yes, you can. Certainly around the pulled areas there is a lot of shading in this ink. You can also see it there in the writing sample a little bit, especially around the T there. Now, is this a sheening ink? I would say no. Typically, light greens do not sheen that much. They can do now and again, but not that often. The next ink here is Scribo Verde Bosco. And I was a little bit dubious earlier on that this colour was actually going to match the colour of the Scribo fill Verde Bosco. But now that it's dried, I'm actually quite liking this. So can you see the difference between a wet or broad and a dry or narrow writing nib? Yes, you can. There is a huge difference there. Typically there are on most inks, but you can definitely see it here. Is there any shading going on here? Yes, you can see shading around the pulled areas as well. Is there any sheen? Now, I want to say yes. It's a very subtle sheen, but right around the edge here of that pulled area, you will see a slight tinge of red. So, and there is actually some redness here on the main wetness pulled area as well. So there is a little bit of sheen, but it's not going to be a sheen monster. So don't buy this ink if you're typically wanting a sheening ink, because you might be a little bit disappointed, but it does have a little bit of subtle sheen going on there. The next ink here is Scribo Blu Capri, and I am on a kick lately for turquoisey coloured inks, cerulean blues, and I have to say This is really nice. Maybe it's because it's summertime. I'm not so sure, but this is really, really nice. So can you see the difference between a wet or broad writing nib and a dry or narrow? Yes, you can, definitely. There is a huge difference between the two here. Can you see shading as well? Yes, there's a lot of shading going on here in the pooled area of ink. Is there any sheen going on? No, not really. You can get sheening. Actually, there may be, again, some edge cases around here that I am seeing a slight sort of red sheen to. But again, it's not a ink that really I would say is going to be a sheen monster ink. So I wouldn't be buying this ink just for the sheen. But it does have a slight sheen there if you are looking for something. And then the last ink here on this ink comparison is Scribo Grigio Scribo. And this is an interesting colour. It's definitely a grey colour, and I have written with this a lot. It is definitely a grey, and I do find it a little bit more on the sort of bluish, cooler side of grey than some other greys that I have. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad writing nib and a dry or narrow writing nib? Yes, you can. There is definitely a huge difference there. Can you see pooling in the pooling area here? Can you see shading going on? Yes, you can. There's a huge amount of shading as well. So this is quite a good ink. If you're going to write with it in a wet writing nib, you may not get as much shading there. Now, is this a sheening ink? I would say no, it's not. Typically, greys are not sheening inks, so I wouldn't really be expecting to see sheen out of most grey inks, and certainly not this ink. So there you have it. That's my Scribo Inks Comparison number 2 video. If there are any of these inks that you like, then do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other inks you'd like me to check out, then do let me know in the comments below. So that's my Scribo Inks Comparison number 2 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.